Everything you were told about the largest predator in the Jurassic was a lie. You hold a phantom in your memory. A 25-meter leviathan named Liopleurodon, broadcasted into the cultural consciousness by early television documentaries and nostalgic textbooks. It is an illusion. A miscalculation of fragmented bone that distorted human understanding for decades. The true sovereign of the Jurassic Ocean does not need exaggerated, fictionalized proportions to induce terror. In the Kimmeridge clay of England, wedged deep within a crumbling cliff face, the earth yielded an organism that shattered the myth. Extracted piece by agonizing piece and verified in 2023, the remains of Pliosaurus funke measure precisely 14.4 meters. It is smaller than the digital monsters of your childhood. It is infinitely more lethal. Paleontologists do not mince words when discussing this genetic line. They place this creature within a highly specific, chilling clade. Thalassophonea, the sea murderers. A taxonomy that abandons clinical scientific neutrality for pure, visceral truth. For 8 million continuous years, Pliosaurus operates as the undisputed apex intelligence of the global ocean. It is a 15-ton biological executioner. A mechanism perfectly optimized for the singular purpose of dismantling other massive lifeforms. It possesses no natural predators. It fears nothing that breathes. And yet, the fossil record reveals a jarring paradox. This lineage, dominant and heavily armored, vanishes abruptly. Evolution engineers the perfect weapon, allows it to reign unchallenged over a water-bound planet, and then casually deletes it from the architecture of life. The ocean swallows the sea murderers whole. To understand why nature destroyed its own masterpiece, you must first understand how it was built. You assume a creature of this mass relies on brute force alone. A chaotic, desperate thrashing of muscle and water. You project mammalian imperfections onto a primordial machine. The truth lies in its geometry. A full quarter of its entire physical length consists of nothing but skull and jaw. The bite force of the Pliosaurus genus defies the structural limits of organic material. The baseline metric, established through the skull of Pliosaurus cavani, registers at an astonishing 49,000 newtons. This is 3 times the crushing capacity of a modern saltwater crocodile. It exceeds the torque of an industrial hydraulic press. But raw kinetic pressure is merely the delivery system. The true devastation lies in the cutting mechanism. Triangular cross-section teeth, industrial sheet metal shears. They do not merely grip flesh to drag prey beneath the waves. They interlock at precise geometric angles, creating a self-correcting scissor mechanism. When the jaws close, the serrated edges bypass each other to execute forcible amputations. Bone does not splinter under this pressure. It is cleanly, mechanically severed. The creature does not chew. It dismantles. Inside its cavernous, pressurized gut sits a secondary grinding mechanism. Stomach stones a living industrial mill. The Pliosaurus purposefully swallows heavy boulders, holding them deep within a muscular chamber. Here, the undigested armor of its prey is subjected to continuous, grinding attrition. It turns its own internal organs into a biological rock tumbler. A refinery designed to break down dense calcium and cartilage into absorbable fuel. We must zoom out. We must look at the delivery vehicle driving this weapon. 4 massive flippers protrude from the central mass. Dual-axle hydrojet propulsion. This is a biological 4x4 system. It generates massive burst thrust, allowing 15 tons of dense muscle to accelerate from a dead, silent drift to a violent ambush strike in fractions of a second. And it does this in the abyss. Imagine the sensory silence. Cut the noise. Cut the light. Drop down to the abyssal plane. 15 tons of muscle suspends itself in pitch-black water. The temperature hovers near freezing. To a human eye, this environment is a sensory void. To the Pliosaurus, the darkness is painted with data. Its massive orbital cavities house ocular receptors operating at 10 times human visual efficiency. It tracks the microscopic thermal shimmer of a cephalopod expelling water in total darkness. It registers the pressure waves of a passing ichthyosaur against its dermal sensors. It calculates distance, trajectory, and mass before the prey even registers the shift in the current. Underneath this sensory array lies the framework holding the machine together. The skeleton, a reinforced steel chassis. It is sneakily compact. Designed not for flexibility, but to tank the kinetic feedback of its own violent collisions. When a 14-meter organism rams a target at high speed, the equal and opposite reaction threatens to shatter its own spine. The Pliosaurus chassis absorbs the shockwave, distributing the kinetic energy across dense, fused vertebrae. But this structural perfection comes with a hidden, agonizing tax. Look beneath the surface of the bone. Peer into the internal matrix of the skull itself. Through high-resolution scans, we see the honeycomb patterns etched deep into the calcium. Sickly yellow and charcoal gray lesions scarring the pristine white structure of the fossil. Avascular necrosis, the bends, permanently inscribed into its skeleton. This is the resolution to the paradox. This is why the apex vanished. The Pliosaurus did not die because it was outcompeted by better predators. It died because it hunted at the absolute, breaking extreme of biological endurance. To sustain its massive metabolic engine, the creature pursued prey deeper into the crushing darkness. Diving to depths exceeding 200 meters. Rapidly ascending to strike. The sudden shifts in hydrostatic pressure forced dissolved gases to form lethal bubbles within its bloodstream. Nitrogen choked the capillaries feeding its skeleton. The bone starved. The tissue died. The sea murderer was so successful, so relentless in its pursuit of dominance, that it literally crushed its own architecture. It maintained its reign by sacrificing its own chassis to the abyss, rotting from the inside out to feed the engine. We must understand the factory that forged such a mechanism. The high-pressure abyssal void. This environment is not a passive backdrop. It is an active, hostile antagonist. At 200 meters deep, the water exerts an invisible, crushing weight against every square inch of flesh. If a human were exposed here, the atmospheric pressure would compress the lungs into useless, flattened sacs. It alters the fundamental chemistry of the blood. There is no cycle of day and night. The sun is a meaningless, forgotten concept. Through this eternal midnight moves a skull longer than the height of a professional athlete. The total mass equates to 2 full-sized orcas, welded together into a single, seamless torpedo of muscle, blubber, and bone. It moves with a low-frequency thrum. The sheer water displacement generates a 20 Hz vibration, a physical pulse echoing through the dark, similar to the acoustic signatures of modern baleen whales. Prey do not hear the Pliosaurus approaching. They feel the water column shudder against their lateral lines. A creeping dread vibrating through the fluid dynamics of the sea. This reign of terror is not brief. The Pliosaur lineage spans 139 million years. It survives the violent planetary shift from the Triassic into the Jurassic. It watches continents tear themselves apart and rearrange the globe. It watches entire orders of life suffocate, freeze, and vanish into the strata. While terrestrial dinosaurs rise and fall upon the shifting dirt, the sea murderers maintain an unbroken, totalitarian grip on the global ocean. Evolution possesses a dark, ironic sense of humor. The genetic tree that birthed this hyperlethal executioner is the Plesiosaur order. Trace the biological lineage down to the modern era, and you will not find the great white shark. You will not find the heavily armored saltwater crocodile. The closest living relatives to this 15-ton biomechanical nightmare are the slow, docile marine turtles. Nature took the blueprint of a passive, reef-grazing wanderer and weaponized it into an industrial slaughterhouse. The ocean forged a king. But deep time is a heavier pressure than water. The Cretaceous dawn brings shifting sea levels. Altered global currents. The deep-water prey populations begin to collapse. The massive metabolic requirements of the Pliosaurus transform overnight from an evolutionary advantage into a fatal liability. The weight of time begins to compress. You look at the ocean today and you assume the shark is the pinnacle of predatory design. To the Pliosaurus, a shark would be a minor annoyance. A temporary inconvenience caught in the teeth. Dinosaurs wandering too close to the tidal zones were not majestic rulers of the earth. They were occasional snacks, dragged into the surf and dismantled by a machine that had already perfected the art of killing 50 million years prior. We view apex dominance through the lens of human arrogance. We measure superiority by our ability to manipulate external objects. We forge steel spears. We build massive cargo ships. We construct titanium submarines to shield our fragile, porous membranes from the crushing reality of the deep sea. We require complex tools to survive environments that actively reject our biology. The Pliosaurus required no external technology. It was the tool. A singular, integrated biological weapon. It dominated an entire planet's oceans not by building a synthetic shell, but by becoming the blade itself. It surrendered its terrestrial origins, modified its limbs into hydraulic turbines, and turned its jaw into a relentless guillotine. Science labeled them Thalassophonea. The sea murderers. We apply this word as a human judgment. We call them murderers as if they committed a moral crime against the ocean. As if their existence was a violent violation of some peaceful, balanced natural order. But within the deep code of evolution, there is no malice. There is only geometry, hydrostatic pressure, and survival. The sea murderers were not villains in a prehistoric drama. They were the most honest expression of life on Earth. A flawless mechanism that never hesitated, never missed, and never apologized for consuming the massive energy required to sustain its chassis. They ruled the crushing darkness for over 100 million years. They adapted to the extreme depths until their very bones decayed from the effort, embracing necrosis just to secure the kill. They achieved absolute, unparalleled biological perfection. And the planet discarded them anyway. Nature spent an eternity calibrating a biological executioner, gave it absolute sovereignty over the largest habitat on Earth, and then quietly erased it when the temperature of the currents shifted by a few degrees. You sit in your concrete cities. You stare at your digital screens, insulated from the food chain. You believe your synthetic intellect exempts you from the unforgiving mechanics of deep time. If evolution can spend 100 million years perfecting a sea murderer, an unstoppable organism that bent the very ocean to its will, only to casually delete it from the fossil record. What is the exact shelf life of human dominance?